we have a special guest speaker, Alyssa Burkus Rolf, who will be speaking to us today about her personal experience with lymphoma. So right now, I'll just pass it over to Alyssa.
Great. Thanks, Charlene. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today. This is exciting for LFC to be doing our first hangout, and we hope that it's good information and that you find it to be helpful for you.
Oh, it looks like we have some feedback.
Yeah, I'm hearing a bit of feedback. Okay. So, and just by way of background, for those of you who don't know me, I have been a board member with Lymphoma Foundation Canada for over 10 years now, and I'm involved with the foundation in different ways. So you may know parts of my story from some of the blog posts I've done or different pieces that I've done, but hopefully the information that we talk about today will be helpful to you in your own journey, whether you're newly diagnosed, just starting out on this journey, or have been living with lymphoma for quite some time. So if we go to the next slide, I have some notes beside me as well. But if we go to the next slide, so just so that you know what we're covering today, I'm going to give you some background about my story. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the coping with diagnosis and the early stages of that process. Talking about as well, who do you tell and how do you have those conversations? Talk a bit about treatment decisions, and then just in general, coping overall. How do we kind of work through and process all these different things? So. I say at the top, once upon a time. So going back over 12 years now, at the beginning of 2001, I had gone to my doctor, and I had a small lump in the side of my neck, about the size of a pea. And I had had it for about 18 months, and the doctor that I had at the time said it was nothing, and certainly I felt fine. I had no symptoms, no fatigue, nothing that would indicate that there was a problem. But I took it to my new family doctor. I was there actually for something else, and said, you know, before I leave, I just want to mention I have this little lump. And he took a look. And he actually thought, you know, this is something that I want to pursue. I'd like to take a look. And that really started the process. At that point, though, I really thought there was nothing to worry about. I had a set of tests. I had blood work and x-rays and some different procedures. Really didn't think anything of it. Nothing showed up in any of those initial tests. But again, my doctor said, you know, there's just something that doesn't seem quite right here. And he encouraged me to have a biopsy. And so even though, you know, I really thought it was nothing, I decided to take his advice. And so I went to see a surgeon. I had a biopsy. And had several nodes under my arm removed. Again, really not thinking there was anything there, and was shocked. A week later, we went back, and the surgeon said to me, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you have lymphoma. You know, I now look back on my life really as there's the time before, and there's the time now after. And the after is getting longer and longer and taking up a much bigger chunk of my life as a percentage. But really it was like stepping into a completely different space, obviously a whole new world as well. And I really look back as that being a significant turning point in my life for lots of different reasons. So So I was told I had lymphoma. I knew it wasn't for probably a couple of weeks that I knew it was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We started doing lots of different research to figure out and understand the disease. But it was a number of months before we could confirm what subtype, what specific kind of lymphoma I had. So I was finally, everyone was in agreement that I have follicular non-Hodgkin's. So what they said to me was, our recommendation to you at this time is that we watch and wait and actually do nothing in terms of treatment, which for those of you who have gone through it, as you can imagine, for those of you who haven't, it was completely counterintuitive to everything that we'd ever heard about cancer. You know, early detection is the best cure, you know, move forward, understand your treatment options. And we were just astonished that they were recommending no treatment. And so it took, excuse me, it took, you know, probably a few months to really come to terms with watch and wait. You know, you really feel like you're waiting for something really bad to happen. It's the craziest process mentally to go through, that you don't know how long it's going to be. There are people who have been on watch and wait for years, and we were told that. So, but you really feel like, at least I did, I really felt that life was on hold. Time was, you know, suspended, and now we were just, you know, we weren't even sure what we were watching and for, or waiting for. And so, you know, it was probably about 9 months during that time period. And of course, by the time we'd gotten comfortable with the idea, then the doctors were deciding that yes, it was actually time to start treatment. I had increasing amounts of fatigue, some nodes that were getting bigger. And so the recommendation to me was to start chemo. And I started chemo in January of 2012. Or sorry, 2002. It feels like yesterday. It really does. So I had 6 months, over 6 months of CBP. Rituxan was not available as an agent at the time. Had a partial response to the chemo. It didn't completely remove all the nodes. I'd had a set of CT scans, and it did still show some presence of nodes. So that was a bit disheartening. Chemo is a pretty intensive you know, period of time. Subsequent to that, over the next few years, I was treated for Rituxan twice. Once for 4 weeks, and then I did the maintenance Rituxan, which was a 2-year period of time, having Rituxan once every quarter, and that seems to have done the trick. And for the first time, I've been, you know, stable for almost 4 years now. So, and some, you know, great things happened along the way, and despite sets of treatment, we, you know, went on to have 2 children, so successful pregnancies, healthy babies, boys who are now 6 and 8 years old. And so, you know, despite all this turmoil and some of the things that we're going to talk about, it's certainly is amazing to me that despite the intensity of those first few months and years, there's some really amazing things that then can still happen in your life. So, so I included this slide on diagnosis. These are the 2010 stats. You know, in 2001, I think it was sort of 6,500, 6,800 people in Canada. We know that the incidence rate is increasing in certain pockets, and you know, it can happen to, you know, unfortunately anybody, anytime, all ages, demographics, races, parts of Canada, parts of the world, but you're not alone. And so I was amazed that a disease that I knew very little about, there were all these people on an annual basis who were being diagnosed. So early days, you know, in the time when I was told, you know, this is something we want to look at, you know, I did a lot of homework and research about what is lymphoma. And for me, there were no symptoms. I really, you know, looking back, I had a bit of fatigue, but working full time and having a lot of things on the go. I had not attributed it to anything, a chronic situation. There are other people who have very significant symptoms, depending on where the tumors occur, that are what prompt them to see a doctor, and in fact what can make the treatment requirements obviously much, much sooner than it was for me. Sorry if my coughing is really loud in your ears. For those of you who are listening, I'm still getting better. The challenge too with lymphoma, and I include the Know Your Nodes, we have a microsite called knowyournodes.ca that really can point to a lot of the different signs and symptoms of lymphoma. One of the challenges with lymphoma in terms of educating people about what is in the disease, or what ways, symptoms, telltale signs that you may have lymphoma, is they can appear like a lot of other illnesses. It can appear like a chronic cold. It can appear like a cough that doesn't go away. Some people have sort of achiness or chest pains. There's some different things, backaches, depending on where the tumors are, can appear as other diseases. So, and for a lot of people, as I said, who have never even heard of lymphoma when they're diagnosed with it, which is not uncommon, it can be very overwhelming. You have this double whammy of needing to learn about a disease you've never heard of, and then having to turn around and explain it to other people as well. So in terms of finding your way, now here we are 12 years later. There are a lot of new resources that I didn't have available at the time, certainly from a web perspective. I would say, and what I found that is really helpful is to learn as much as you can about the disease. Learn about lymphoma for yourself. Learn about your particular subtype. Be comfortable with the terminology. Ask questions to your doctor. Use resources like the ones you can find on our website at lymphoma.ca. Finding out as much information as you can, even though it can be scary to read the different things, it really is important to find that information. For me, what I found to be really, really helpful was to try to find my way to a community of other people who had gone through this. At the time, I didn't know anybody who had ever been diagnosed with lymphoma. There was nobody in my life. And so it took some time before I actually met a few people, in particular a woman very close to the same age as me in my hometown who was diagnosed with it, and we met up at a patient support session and have become friends. I also ended up meeting some people who had been diagnosed a number of years before, and what was great about that was really understanding that this could be a point in time that there was treatment that I could go through, and I could be just like this other person who had been living with lymphoma, my exact kind of lymphoma, for quite some time. So I took a lot of comfort in really wanting to find other people and a sense of community. And now with different things through Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, there's other channels that are available to people that can be helpful. So telling other people about a disease, if you look at slide 7, I picked this visual. Sorry, you had the cancer, nobody celebrates with cute pink water bottles. The infusion of information, in particular about breast cancer, there are a lot more people who are diagnosed with breast cancer. And most other cancers you can identify with a body part, brain, stomach, lung. People can immediately identify if they didn't know that was a body part where you could get cancer. They know at least where that body part is. With lymphoma, people have heard of it. They may have heard of Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's. I would have people say to me, "Oh, you have non-Hodgkin's, so does that mean you don't have cancer?" It's very complex It's all through your lymph system. A lot of us don't remember from grade 5 health what the heck a lymph node is and what it does and where it could be in the body. And so if it's this body part you've never heard of, why is it such a big deal that you have cancer there? And in my case, eventually explaining to people that it was a chronic illness that would recur, you know, when I was on Watch and Wait and would say, you know, there's no treatment that I'm doing initially, you know, I would get these looks of, oh, so does that mean, you know, there's nothing they can do? Like it's going to come back, or it's, you know, and it's like, no, it's actually a good thing that they don't want to treat it right away. You just have to wait a while and see what happens. But it's challenging, you know, as I said, to be the person who has to learn about the disease and educate their friends and family about it. You don't have that immediate awareness of where to go in the community. You don't have friends saying to you, oh, I know a person who had this disease, I'm going to introduce you, and, you know, that sort of thing. So it's difficult. And one of the things that we try to do at Lymphoma Foundation Canada is really try to get awareness out there so that as patients are being diagnosed, their friends and family have heard of the disease, they've heard of the foundation, and they know where to go to help give some support. So, you know, the process of telling people is unique for each and every patient, and I can't begin to tell you all the different scenarios of when and how and who to tell. Certainly for most patients, telling immediate family, their close circle, that this has happened, even if treatment isn't required right away, is helpful. You know, to have that pool, that pocket of people that you can tell. It's okay to say, I don't know a lot about this. For people who come to me and say, I have a friend who is diagnosed with lymphoma, what do I do? The first thing I'll say to them is, educate yourself about this illness. Don't leave it to the patient to tell you all the ins and outs of the disease that they have. It was such a relief to me when I would have friends who would come to me and say, hey, you know, I was doing some reading and I did some searches on the internet. It was the internet back then in those days. We did, you know, there wasn't this savviness that was there. It was more of a challenge to find information on the web and know what you could trust. But it was such a relief to me that people would take the initiative to find out information, to bring me nuggets of information about the disease and not be reliant on me to explain the ins and outs. And for those of you who are working, you know, it really is a tough call to know when and who at work and how to tell them. For some people, if they're not being treated right away, they might wait a while. You know, in other cases, you don't necessarily have that opportunity. You may have to step away from your job right away. It's up to you to decide how much to reveal and how much, you know, if your colleagues are people that you want to be able to include in this process and confide in and have support from. The flip side is, you know, wanting to know that they still see you as the same person who's able to get things done. So I see some questions here about testing on the previous step. So there are blood tests. Some people, depending on the blood markers that show up, it'll indicate something's going on right away. More often than not, it will involve scans and a biopsy to really confirm at the cell level that what they're seeing is lymphoma. And some people prefer to wait before telling people. They have a lot of fear and feel the need to protect their loved ones. Did you experience that at all? Absolutely. You know, I would jokingly say to people years later, not as it was happening, that as I thought about communicating, talking to people about this illness, I had a list of people that had to hear it straight from me right away. But I sort of built in a bit of a phone tree, and so I had pockets of friends that I just couldn't bear to have the same conversation over and over again. It was very overwhelming. And so Like it or not, I appointed different people to get the word out. So I had someone who talked to my neighbors on our street, and I had another person tell my set of high school girlfriends, and a few other sort of poor souls who were chosen and tapped on the shoulder to get the word out that Alyssa's sick. But it was such a relief to me, and I just decided that I needed to, as much as it was overwhelming to imagine having these conversations, that I knew those were people who could tell other people in a loving way. You know, the people closest to you, it can be really, really hard to tell your loved ones that this is happening. I know I went through periods of time where I would manage the flow of information. I never talked to people about the stats. If they found it out for themselves, you know, fine, but I didn't talk about the odds. It was years before I would tell people that there was actually a time frame. At the time when I was diagnosed, the average person lived for about 10 years with my type of lymphoma. They no longer use those stats with newly diagnosed patients, but at the time that was something that was happening. I didn't share that number with people. You know, that was just my way of trying to help them through it. You know, I look back on that time and I wonder, would I do anything differently? It's hard to know, but I think that, you know, I think there's probably times where I worried too much about carrying the burden myself so others didn't have to carry it. And I've often wondered if I had handled it differently. I think, I suspect, and I know others have told me that this is the case, that they would have gladly carried that load with me. And if I had been more comfortable sharing it with them, they were tough enough, they could have taken it. So it was good advice. So just, you know, to prepare you, there are some range of things that people will say when they hear the news, and not all of it is very helpful. So, you know, there's lots of people that are in your life who will be wonderful, and who will know what to do, and who will step in, or who will be honest with you and say, oh my gosh, I have no idea what to say to you right now. And I've said to those people, that's okay. I'm glad you're not trying to pretend that you're an expert in lymphoma, this disease you didn't know about until 5 minutes ago when I dumped this load of news on you. So, but there's going to be people who will say to you, well, what's lymphoma? And you're going to have to be, not have to, but you may want to be ready for how do you answer that question. I had a number of people say to me, like more than 5. I had, you know, a large handful of people who said, oh, yeah, I knew a guy or a person of a friend or a friend of a friend or somebody's uncle, and, you know, and yeah, no, I know they had lymphoma. And my follow-up question would be, oh, and how are they doing? Yeah, they died. And, you know, that wasn't particularly helpful news at the time. You know, I later found out that there's over, you know, at the time there were over 30 different forms of lymphoma. I've heard over 40 different forms of lymphoma. There are lots of different kinds of lymphoma. There are a lot, you know, the age range of when people are diagnosed, the circumstances that they're in. There's so many different factors at play. Even if you're in a particular category, new treatments are being developed all the time. You know, I was, you know, of a younger age, and I thought healthy. I was still being told, you know, on average 10 years. And yet in that 10-year time frame, Rituxan has become a very successful drug in managing my kind of lymphoma. They didn't know that when I was diagnosed. And so there's lots of reasons to still be hopeful and optimistic. But it's difficult when you hear those things. So you'll have people who say, tell me everything, you know, they want to know the ins and outs and maybe more than you want to share, and you're going to have to know what you want to do. We had lots of lovely people say, is there anything I can do, and if you need anything. And so again, when I have friends who come to me and say, I have this friend or a family member who's been diagnosed with lymphoma or with cancer that I don't know what to do, and I will say to them, as much as you can, come up with those suggestions of what you want to do. Bring them a meal, take their kids to the movies, line up somebody to clean their house the week that they have treatment. You come up with the idea of what you think might be helpful to them, instead of leaving them in a position of saying, I could really use a meal. I could really use some quiet time in my house. My kids are really struggling, and I don't have the energy to take them to the park. It can be very tough as a patient to ask for help. Some people can't become comfortable with it, but one of the greatest things that I think your community can do for you as a patient is be the one to come to you with those ideas. There's even, there's books about what to do for a friend who has cancer. And use those resources and come up with some ideas. I actually had, shout out to my high school girlfriends. I have a group of lovely friends who decided amongst themselves, there's 6 of them, that they would arrange for someone to drop a meal off to me every week when I started treatment. And it took me, I know, chemo brain and all that, it took me the 7th week to realize this was actually maybe kind of organized. I thought by amazing coincidence and luck, a different person was popping by every week, and how wonderful that was. And it really wasn't until that 7th week that I went, none of them showed up in the same week. And, and so anyway, I include those pictures. Unfortunately, those are 2 individuals who have since passed away, whose pictures were sent to me. Well, not obviously Andy Whitfield, but I would have those similar circumstances. So, hey, you need to be ready for whatever, unfortunately, gets sent your way. So if we look at telling children, it's tough. I did not have kids at the time. I see from Tracy Ann. No, I did not meet my husband after I was diagnosed. We were together. We were, I'd say, newlyweds. We were married for about 4 years. And yeah, being a young adult, and there's a number of challenges with that. I'm hoping we'll explore as a separate hangout. I'm probably too old to run that hangout, but we'll find someone. And affecting us as a couple, it's tough. He might even be watching the on-air YouTube right now. I would say to him at times, right, I'm going to be mad, sad, glad. It's all going to be one big, bubble of fun. And I don't know what my mood's going to be. And it could change 5 seconds later. And you could tell the same joke about cancer that I told yesterday. But when you tell it, I'm going to be mad at you because you're the one telling it. And that's, just crazy things would happen that you just never in a million years. I'll say to people who are, dating somebody, when you have to say those words, for better, for worse, for sickness and in health, really think about that. It could be that in sickness and the challenging times, it's not all sunshine and roses, or it's not, you don't get a reprieve for 5 or 6 years of nothing bad happening. It can happen at any time. But it's tough, but you do get through it. You become a team. There's things that you find funny that no one else finds funny. They've seen you at your worst. At least you feel it's your worst when, you have no hair and no energy, and they stick with you and they help you get through it. And it can be an amazing part of your life together. And then as a team, in terms of telling children, you need to think about how you're going to do this. And as much as your instinct is to protect them from it, maybe you want to hide it from them. It's very difficult to do. And it's, in my opinion, it's unfair because likely they're going to hear about it from somebody else. So what I would say to parents who are newly diagnosed, there's lots of great web resources for parents with cancer and how to tell your kids. A lot of them will say, Be honest in an age-appropriate way. So it needs to be greatly simplified. If your children are, 6 and under, you know them better than anybody, what language to use. If I think about my kids now, I would probably build something in Lego for them to show them, the different pieces in a body, and here's lymph nodes, and here's what's happening. Because that would be in their language and something that they would likely be comfortable with. So, take some time. In my case, I do still need to tell my kids because I continue to live with this disease. And I've just tried to weave it in naturally to the conversation. So they know that lymphoma exists. They know that I've been involved with the foundation, and then I start talking to them about why I've become involved. Well, I am a lymphoma patient. Oh, what does that mean? And, Mommy, you said before that, this, and they'll ask a follow-up question. So, it's lingering. And obviously, if you're in the midst of a diagnosis, if treatment is, a week away, you don't have that luxury of easing into it, but you can still space it out a bit for them. You can still start the conversation and then follow up a little bit later with treatment or whatever that looks like. You'll know best, and in some cases your kids may help guide you to the level of information that they need. You might not be ready to talk about hair loss or fatigue or changes that you're worried about are coming, but they may ask those questions, and you'll have to think about what it is you want to share with them. So Tanya's posting, you mentioned it's important to find a community of others. Any negative consequences with being part of such a community, like when one of them isn't well. Yeah, I've lost a number of friends to lymphoma over the years. Part of what I really, from my own experience, what I have found to be important is I want to be there for newly diagnosed patients or people who are living with the disease. And, there's times where people have said to me, oh, I don't want to relive this for you. Well, I want to share my experience, because if there's any small piece of information in what I went through that helps make it easier for someone else to deal with their own diagnosis or deal with treatment, then I'm willing to share that. But there are times where I've had friends who have not made it, and it is tough. But on the whole of it, what you find as you join this community is there's a lot more people who are living with this than those who unfortunately lose their battle. And so that broader community is what helps you get through those really dark lows when someone isn't going to survive it, or you hear the news that someone has passed away. It's that bigger group that can lift you up and help you know that there's reason to have hope, because for every person who loses the fight, there are hundreds, and if you get on the web, thousands, and if you go globally, hundreds of thousands of people who are living with this disease and living very, very well. And that makes all the difference. So treatment decisions, I included this in here because it is a huge part of the initial diagnosis stage. I talked a bit about watch and wait, and it is a treatment option. The treatment is to do nothing at this time. And once I got my head around that terminology, it helped me be more comfortable with it. But it is an evaluation. It's a decision point, just like later on, I needed to be involved in the decision of which course of treatment to take. There were several different options as a follicular patient, and I'm not a doctor. I feel like one now, but for all the medical terms I've had to deal with. But it's overwhelming. In the case of somebody who needs to have treatment right away, there may be just one recommended course. There may be options. It's a lot harder to feel comfortable with those decisions. And I always just say, the more information that you have, and the people that are around you that you can ask for them to support you in working through this process, I just think the better. I always say to people, start a notebook. you will not remember anything, not anything, but you won't remember everything that you talk to your doctor about in those early appointments. Bring someone with you who's taking notes. Write down your questions in that notebook of what you want to ask, and take the time to talk to your care team, which isn't just your doctor. There's a set of nurses. There are other resources that are available at most, if not all, cancer hospitals now. There are community resources outside of that are also possibilities for sources of information. So you may be very seriously ill. You may be hospitalized with a particularly critical form of lymphoma or the stage that it's at. But you can still say to somebody, I need you to go and talk to someone about wigs. Or I need you to go and talk to someone downstairs. I've been told there's a room that has pamphlets. I need that pamphlet. Or you can say to someone, I'm so overwhelmed. I need you to go online and help me figure out what these side effects are going to be like. I need you to go with me to treatment that first day. It's okay to ask. They may say to you, I can't, and that's okay too. But ask for some help to get that additional support network in place as you move through that phase. So coping, I think I mentioned at the beginning, it's this weird time where a lot of things stop being as serious as they once were. I can remember being in the lunchroom at my office, and I hadn't told anybody yet at work that I'd been diagnosed. And I'm standing in the lunchroom and, making the Monday morning chit chat. Hey, how was your weekend? And I remember this woman saying to me, oh, I have a terrible cold and I just feel like crap. And in my head I'm thinking, oh yeah, I got cancer, So it changes your lens of the world very significantly, and not always in good ways, obviously. In some respects, it brings a number of things into really sharp focus that can actually be a good thing. I never say cancer was a blessing or, it's a present in barbed wire, any of those metaphors that people use. There are some positive things that can come out of this experience, but certainly in the moment there are some things that don't matter as much anymore. And, you become sort of a little self-centered, a little focused on me for a while, and that's okay. It's going to happen. I would just say, tell people to be patient with you and be patient with yourself. It's, there's going to be some ups and downs. Figure out what those things are that help you feel calmer about a situation, that help you work through the questions. If it's a ritual, if you run and you can still do those things or go for a walk in nature, whatever it is, sleep well, eat well as much as you can. Again, everybody's circumstances are so different. There's no one thing. Even their type of symptoms and diagnosis, there's no one thing. So, but really take some time to think about what you need. Tell people to expect the unexpected. What's funny is things can flip around quite dramatically too. I can remember saying to somebody who had just said to me, oh, I had a really bad cold, but oh my gosh, I'm not going to tell you about that because it's nothing compared to what you're going through. And I remember saying to them, you know what, I actually really enjoy talking about the regular stuff that we always talk about. I want to hear about your crazy kids who jumped off the furniture and landed on the coffee table and broke the lamp. And I want to talk about regular stuff. I don't want everything to always be so heavy. So, and I said earlier about something that's funny one minute isn't funny the next, and people can't keep up with you. Yeah, I mean, there's times where you just have to tell people, you know what, I need this right now. Let's go do this. Let's go to a movie, or let's go. We would find too that I don't know if you find this, but you know, when you are thinking about buying a particular something, the example I always have is a car, and you've never really heard of it before or seen it, and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere. For us, it was like that with lymphoma. Like all of a sudden, TV shows, people were being diagnosed with lymphoma, and it just seemed to pop up everywhere. So you may find that too, that it just seems to come out of the blue at you in different ways. So, you know, one of the slides I include, this next slide is laughing again. It really is possible. You really will, as much, if you're living in the early stages of diagnosis right now, you're probably not imagining that that's possible. This was a cartoon that I found when I was going through chemo that I just thought was hilarious. And there's all kinds of crazy stuff that you can find, but you know, find ways to laugh again. It's important. Managing stress, you know, is very important. This was I think it's a pencil drawing that I found on Pinterest that someone had done. I don't know. I'm assuming that the artist from the title has lymphoma. Find an outlet. Maybe it's something new. I started yoga for a while as something totally different to do. And, you know, there may be different things that people do, something they haven't done for years that they pick up again, something they've always wanted to do. There's all kinds of resources that are out there and information for cancer patients, Tai Chi, you know, some different things. So, so Tanya posts, did you find that you had people giving you all sorts of advice on how to manage your stress? Oh, yeah. Some very helpful. You know, I was always grateful to each and every person who came to me with an idea, a suggestion, a book. I had somebody mail me twigs that you make a tea out of that had restorative properties. I had a lot of books sent to me, some CDs with calming music. I mean, I had all kinds of stuff sent to me. You know, some of them you need to take with a grain of salt. Someone who says to you, I found the cure, and, you know, click this link, and if you give them $600, they're going to mail you some stuff, and it's going to really help. I know there's a bunch of people that, you know, there's some things that you really have to evaluate and question if that's really in your best interest to do. But in every instance when people would send things to me or send me, you know, an email or a note, I was just so grateful to them because it said that it reminded me that I had other people who were helping carry this load for me, and you know, I was just so grateful to them for that. So I included this image. I think it's a poster somewhere. Today's the day to fight for tomorrow. It really is what you're doing. You know, you are fighting for your life. It's a very serious situation to embark on. It's very overwhelming. There are so many uncertainties that make it very daunting, and you're fighting for your life. But today is the day. You have today, and lots of other todays to follow, and you know, you'll get there, and it will be you know, a number of unexpected twists and turns, but someday you will be running a Google Hangout chat and you will be talking about this thing that happened to you, you know, 12 or 13 years ago, and you will just find that extraordinary that all of a sudden you're going to flash forward to all this time and find yourself talking about it as being something that's in the past. So I don't know if there are any other questions. So Tracy Ann asks, does the possibility of relapse linger in your thoughts, and how do you deal with it? So my kind of lymphoma, I've been told, has a very, very high recurrence rate. It's almost at 100%. So I've been told to expect a recurrence, which, you know, some days I think is, you know, I wish I had a curable form, but obviously. But in other respects, it's preparing me for that. When I finished Watch and Wait and started treatment, it was like being diagnosed all over again. I think I'd kind of convinced myself that I would be on Watch and Wait for a long, long time, and that actually secretly I didn't have cancer. And so that's why they were letting me on watch and wait, is that they thought maybe there was a question in their minds about whether this was a possibility. So, you know, it's a reality for me. I'm very mindful of it, that I could have a recurrence. The interesting thing is there's no real time frame. So it could be 6 months from now, it could be 5 years from now. There really is a huge range. And I really focus on what are the things that I can do today to feel like I'm making healthy choices. So whether it's exercise or eating well, and I don't make healthy choices each and every hour of every day, but I'm mindful of those things, that those are things that I feel I have control over, and I can make those choices to live in that way. And so I find that really helpful. And I keep up on the research. I understand what treatments are coming, and see them in the pipeline, and I know there will be other opportunities for new drugs that come all the time. And so, I find that really helpful as well, to see that that those options will be ahead for me and will be of hopefully great help to me if and when I need them. Any other questions out there? Charlene, did you see anything come through on Twitter, or anything that we should address before we wrap up?
Yeah, nothing on Twitter right now, and I think there's just one more question in there about watch and wait.
Oh, okay. So when you explained watch and wait to others, did you find that they challenged this as a credible medical treatment? Yeah, I mean, when I was on watch and wait, I wasn't actually using the words treatment at that time. It was years later where I figured out that that was actually terminology that they were starting to use. So, I had a lot of people question that. I just had to know that I really trusted my doctor. We had discussed it at length. We had talked about different scenarios. In some respects, it was buying me a bit of time to really better understand the illness and what was ahead. I felt much more prepared for chemo when it happened. So not everybody has that luxury, obviously. Yeah, I mean, people really doubted it. And as I said earlier, there were some people who translated what I said as being that they were saying there was nothing that they could do. And that I found distressing. And I needed to help them understand that that's not what we were talking about. There may be treatment required in the future, but it was actually good news that I didn't need treatment right now, because it meant that the disease was not affecting my health to a degree that required intervention. So that was actually a good news story. I had a slow growing form of cancer that was not going to impact my health in the short term, and so they did not want to treat it. So people come around to that. And so Tracy Ann asks, in terms of your initial diagnosis, when the doc says, I'm sorry to say this, how did you feel it was handled? Compassionate, careless, could it have been handled better? I was very fortunate. The surgeon that I had was amazing. He told me in that meeting that he knew as soon as he saw the node come out, the lymph node come out, he felt that it was going to come back as cancer. And so I think he knew that a week later he was going to be sitting down with a 31-year-old woman and telling her that she had cancer. So he was extraordinary, it was calm. I mean, here's a guy who has no information. He really only knows that it's lymphoma and doesn't know anything other than that. Doesn't really know what's going to happen to me next. What he said was I would be referred to the local hematologist who would get in touch with me, but he didn't know who specifically that was going to be. There were a lot of unknowns, so to have to sit down with me and give me that information, and yet he did it in a way that was very compassionate and kind. And I obviously still remember that day vividly, but I'm grateful to him for that. I know not everybody's experience is that way, and I'm glad that I was fortunate enough to have had someone with that kind of compassion to speak to us. So, any other questions coming in?
Well, I think that's
great.
everything.
Great.
Alyssa, I just want to, on behalf of Lymphoma Foundation Canada, just want to thank you so much for taking the time out to be a part of our first Hangout spot.
It's my pleasure. I was happy to do it. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Bye, everyone.